Jesus versus religion, the spiritual rebel who called out the system. Do you think you understand what spirituality really means? But what if I told you that the greatest spiritual revolutionary in history spent most of his time not building religion, but tearing it down? That the man millions worship today would be horrified by what has been built in his name. While you search for God in temples and religious hierarchies, you might be looking in the exact opposite direction from where Jesus pointed. The unconscious of organized religion invading your direct connection to the divine. Jesus consistently chose the outcasts over the religious elite, valued mercy over sacrifice, and saw the kingdom of heaven in places the religious authorities declared unholy. Think about this. How many times have you felt spiritually drained after religious services? How many times have you been told you're not faithful enough, not giving enough, not believing the right way? Jesus called this out directly. Religious leaders were projecting their own spiritual emptiness onto the people they were supposed to serve. You cease to be a seeker and become a follower, dependent on human intermediaries. The most frightening part? You often don't realize you're trapped. You think you're being faithful, meanwhile you're sinking into a system designed not to bring you closer to the divine, but to keep you spiritually dependent. Jesus made it clear, the greatest spiritual dangers don't come from those who reject faith, but from those who weaponize it. They are not evil, they are spiritually dangerous. In this video, we'll expose 3 types of religious manipulation that Jesus identified as most destructive. We'll use his own words from the Gospels to show you how to recognize these patterns, and perhaps see them within yourself. Are you ready? After hearing this, you will never look at organized religion the same way. When faith becomes performance. Imagine carrying a backpack full of religious rules while trying to connect with God. Every step towards spiritual freedom weighed down by someone else's interpretation of what God wants. Jesus said, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." But religious systems pile spiritual obligations onto people like stones. In Matthew 23, Jesus confronts this. They tie up heavy loads and put them on other people's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to lift a finger to move them. Burden bearers don't see you as capable of direct connection with God. They see you as a project to manage, a soul to control. When you feel God in nature, they redirect you to their building. When you find peace in quiet prayer, they say it should come from their service. This is so subtle that you start questioning your own spiritual experiences. Was that really God, or should I ask my pastor? Thus, spiritual manipulation occurs without a single doctrine being preached. Remember Jesus' actual message: the kingdom of heaven is within you, not within church buildings or hierarchies, within you. The moral gatekeepers, when righteousness becomes a weapon. Sometimes spiritual danger comes from what seems most holy, the perfectly righteous who never seem to sin. Jesus described these Pharisees, "You are like whitewashed tombs, beautiful outside, but full of dead bones inside." The moral gatekeeper masters spiritual superiority. They perform perfect behavior, but have never experienced the radical grace Jesus offered. Everything seems rehearsed for an invisible religious audience. They project demands for perfect righteousness onto you, express doubt or struggle, and they become uncomfortable, judgmental, ready to correct you. You start policing your thoughts, measuring your prayers, hiding parts of your spiritual experience. Gradually, you perform for God instead of relating to God. This spiritual perfectionism is contagious and deadly to authentic faith. But when someone represses their spiritual struggles too long, something dangerous happens. The religious shadow, when denied darkness explodes. Some religious people live perfectly controlled, always biblically correct, always morally pure. But everything they consider unholy gets pushed into the basement of their religious life, not overcome, just repressed. Jesus understood this. When Pharisees brought him a woman caught in adultery, Ready to stone her, Jesus said, "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone." The religious shadow is internal. The spiritual pride you won't admit, the religious superiority you rationalize, the judgment you call discernment. Everything rejected transforms into religious shadow. These people seem admired, disciplined in prayer, generous in giving, but they can't tolerate spiritual messiness in others. They react poorly to vulnerability, never admit struggles themselves, until they shock everyone. Affairs, corruption, abuse of power, spectacular collapse. Jesus was clear: the more perfect the performance, the more brutal the eventual explosion. The shadow contains not just bad things, but your denied authenticity, repressed questions, hidden doubts. When ignored, this poisons entire faith communities. The spiritual vampires, when others feed on your faith. Some religious people don't want your faith, they want your spiritual energy. They drain it through subtle neediness, chronic victimhood, dependency disguised as fellowship. They need constant prayer support, daily comfort, endless availability for their crises. But there's a void you'll never fill, no matter how much you give. You offer support, then time, then tolerate abuse in Christian love, until you realize your spiritual energy is gone, and you don't know where their faith ends and yours begins. The exhaustion is existential. Your connection to God feels devoured, drop by drop. Jesus spoke of people who, unable to sustain their own relationship with God, attach like spiritual parasites. You feel guilty wanting space, selfish wanting quiet time with God alone. The vampire reverses roles, from victim to accuser. Soon you're living to avoid their crises, sustaining a relationship that kills your divine connection. The way out: reclaiming your spiritual sovereignty. Jesus offers a path to make religious unconsciousness conscious. This applies to others and ourselves. Perhaps you've been one of these types too. None of us is immune. We all have spiritual shadow, religious wounds. The difference is who has courage to look within versus who projects that weight onto others. This video was a mirror into dynamics that bind and hurt us spiritually. If you've made it this far, you're ready to see, name, and break free. True spiritual freedom isn't about condemning religious people, but stepping out of the hostage position and reclaiming sovereignty over your divine relationship. The kingdom of heaven is within you, not in systems, hierarchies, or perfect doctrines. Within you, where Jesus said it always was. Remember what Jesus taught: by their fruits you will recognize them. If a religious system leaves you drained, guilty, controlled, or disconnected from authentic divine relationship, you have your answer about what spirit they represent. True spirituality should liberate, not imprison. Connect you deeper to the divine, not make you dependent on human intermediaries. Celebrate your authentic journey, not force you into someone else's mold. If you're in religious environments using these patterns, set boundaries. Trust your direct divine experience. No human or institution owns your relationship with God. Most importantly, examine yourself. Which patterns do you recognize in your spiritual behavior? This awareness isn't condemnation, it's the beginning of freedom. Jesus came not to create another religious system, but to show that the divine is immediately accessible to every heart. Grace is free, love is unconditional, and the kingdom isn't a place you earn admission to, but a reality you awaken to. This is the spiritual rebellion Jesus started, not against God, but against any system between human hearts and divine love. That rebellion continues today, every time someone chooses authentic relationship over religious performance. Leave in the comments which patterns you've encountered and which you recognize within yourself. Your comment could spark spiritual awareness for others. If this resonated, click subscribe for the next video on building genuine faith beyond religious manipulation. The more light we shine on religious unconsciousness, the less it controls our divine connection.